Okay, good morning, everybody. So I'll start in traditional NHS style and say, hello, my name is Paul Deemer. I'm the Head of Diversity and Inclusion at NHS Employers. So how many people know NHS Employers? Okay, only about half. Is that right? Yeah? Okay. So NHS Employers, we're the Employers Association for the NHS, so we represent the 500 odd NHS organisations around England, and we help and support them around a range of human resources issues. So today is a first for me. I was saying to Edward earlier, I've never spoken to a finance audience before. I normally speak to HR audiences or nurses or doctors or mixed management audiences. So I've probably spoken to individual finance officers, but I've never spoken to a bespoke finance audience. So this is fascinating for me, but also quite scary as well, because I know nothing about finance, apart from my payslip that I get every month. That's about the best that I know. I've always tried to avoid finance in HR as much as I could. But you've always been a very good support to me, so thank you. Now, Edward mentioned social media. I'm a big social media fan, and when you come to an NHS Employers presentation, we always tell you to leave your phones on, but on silent, as Edward said. You've got a hashtag here. How many people are on Twitter? A few, okay, all right. So the first thing I want to do is take a picture of you all. Is that all right? Do you mind? If you object, you might want to leave the room now. And I'll post that on Twitter later on. Is that okay? And you can wave if you like, because that always makes it more interesting if you wave. Is that okay? And smile. Okay. Brilliant. Right, no waving. Okay. Okay. So, and yes, so your hashtag there is FFF. Diversity. There's Slido. Slido is very good, actually. We use it a lot in our conferences. I'd encourage you to use it if you ever organise anything like this. It's a good way of capturing people's questions and thoughts as well. So, so you've invited me along today to talk about what does equality, diversity and inclusion mean to you. So I'm going to do this in a few ways. So I'm going to start by, well, I'm going to show you a video in a minute, which I'll talk about in a second. And then I'm going to tell you some, what I'm going to call powerful truths about diversity, which is based on some work that has been done by Deloitte's, the consultancy. Do people know Deloitte's? Yeah, yeah. So I'm going to talk to you about that. I'm then going to try and get you to think about what diversity and inclusion means to you. So I think that was part of the remit and part of the purpose of today is to get you to start to think about that on a personal level. Yeah, what does diversity and inclusion mean to you? And how does it affect your work as well? And then we'll see where we go from there, really. So we've got about an hour. And I'd like this to be as interactive as possible. I tend not to do presentations. I don't like doing presentation. I've got a number of slides, but they're not really slides. They're just sort of prompts. And I'm not going to, bore you to death with PowerPoint. So, and I like using video, but I hate using video because I dread when you press the button and the video doesn't work. But Grace has reassured me that it will work. So. So I'm gonna start by showing you a video. So this video, because you were finance people, I thought you'd like this. So this was a video that was shown at the World Economic Forum this year. People know the World Economic Forum, the Davos event? Yeah, that's held every year where all the global leaders meet. Is it Switzerland, I think? Switzerland? Yeah. So for the first time this year, there was a plenary session at Davos around disability equality worldwide. Yeah, so there was a there was a panel discussion with really senior sort of business leaders talking about disability equality in the workplace. And as part of that, there was some material that was produced, one of which is this video. And I'll tell you now, because people have asked me afterwards, it's a spoof video, right? These aren't real companies, okay? So, because people have sat through this before, and then at the end they said to me, do they really exist, those people? And I had to tell them, no, it's not meant to be. But it's got a serious point to it.
Congratulations on making the top 100 diverse-ish companies for 2019.
Thank you.
So this year you've announced that diversity is at the heart of your brand agenda. How does that address disability?
That's a terrific question. And the thing is, I think this is all about inclusivity. Yeah. So this year, for instance, Chris, we sponsored a float at the Gay Parade. So we're completely supportive currently of all the LGBT, the QI, there's more letters, I know, and I always forget them.
It does change all the time.
We believe in marketing to everyone. We don't want to single out disabled people for special treatment because that's, you know, they're too valuable.
So you don't market to anyone specifically?
We do. We do to everyone who fits in with the core brand message, which is as much about inclusion as it is about embracing the future.
La diversité est essentielle dans notre groupe. Nous avons fait réaliser une fresque magnifique sur le mur de la cantine qui célèbre, et je pense que ça va vous plaire, l'émancipation des Noirs.
I just wondered, what with your reputation as being a company with diversity very much a part of your brand ethos, whether you've ever considered a range of clothing for disabled people?
We're a high fashion brand for, you know, those with high disposable incomes. So disability isn't really an obvious choice for us. I mean, we love disabled people. So we're really active in helping and supporting other companies within this sector to solve that problem. Thanks for asking.
And what about disability in the workplace? Do you have any disabled employees?
Oh, yes. In fact, just stop the cameras for a second.
Would you say that the makeup of your company workforce is reflective of the percentage of people with disabilities of working age in this country?
Disability is something we feel is very important in this business going forward. I think 2019 is going to be an exciting year to be disabled.
Yeah. So this is Bill. He's paraplegic, isn't that right, Sharon? And you're on our diversity page on our website, aren't you, Bill?
Yes, I'm the only one currently.
Tremendous addition to the team.
Yeah, disability is something that we are committed to investing in very soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
When?
Le tout est de trouver le moment le plus opportun. 2019 est déjà consacré à célébrer la femme, l'avenir est féminin et tout ça.
Because 2019 is earmarked for BAME, BAME. It's an important cause and means a lot to me personally.
2020?
Ice caps.
2021?
Mindfulness. Because...
Do you have a year in mind for people with disabilities?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, just watch this space. That's what I can say. Yeah. So...
Yeah.
Okay, so a bit light-hearted, but as I say, with a serious note to it, because I've had those conversations, particularly with board members. Yeah, I've met a number of chairs and chief executives, and shall I leave that there? Yeah, some of the conversations I've had have been very, very difficult because I've had responses like that to diversity. I don't know whether did it resonate with people? Yeah. Okay. So So this is my one proper slide, actually. And this is a summary of a report that was done last year, as I say, by Deloitte. And they did this report on the back of some work that they were doing with Qantas. Do you know Qantas, the Australian airline? Yeah. So in 2013, Qantas recorded a loss of 2.8 billion Australian dollars. So a loss of 2.8 billion, which is a record loss for them. By 2017, they turned that round to a record £850 million profit. And Deloitte were interested in that. Yeah, that's a 4-year period. To go from that level of loss to that level of profit was significant. So they were interested in that. So they went to talk to Qantas, and they talked to their chief executive. And I'll read you what he said, actually. So this is a guy called Alan Joyce. So they asked, what's the reason for this turnaround? And he said, we have a very diverse environment and a very inclusive culture. And he said it was these characteristics that got us through the hard times. The diversity generated better strategy, better risk management, better debates, and better outcomes. So that was the chief executive of Qantas, saying that it was an inclusive environment, an inclusive culture that was critical and key to that turnaround. So on the back of that, Deloitte did some research, and they went and talked to 50 of their biggest global customers, and which covered about, I think, a few 100,000 employees that it covered. And they found, this was their conclusion of what the 8 powerful truths about diversity were for all of these businesses, yeah? And so I just want to talk through those and explain a little bit about what they found and what their thinking was, and I'll try and apply some of that as well to the NHS. So they found firstly that diversity of thinking is the new frontier. So as much as, I think we get fixated sometimes on numbers and demographics in terms of thinking that represents diversity within an organisation. But actually what they found was it was diversity of thinking that was the most significant factor in a lot of these organisations. So they found that the organisations that had a culture of diversity and a culture of diverse thinking were actually 20% more innovative, and also 30% less risk averse as well. So there seemed to be some commonality there in terms of having a diverse culture, being more innovative and more risk averse as well. Secondly, they found that diversity without inclusion is not enough. So they found a lot of organisations, and we do this a lot in the NHS as well. So, and a bit like some of those companies there. So you might do a token gesture. You might, I don't know, have a sort of parade, a bus on a parade, yeah, the Gay Pride, which was on Saturday in London. Or you might have run a women's leaders development programme, yeah, or a BAME development programme, yeah. We do lots of this stuff, yeah. The point that Deloitte made was that's not enough. Yeah, you can do that stuff and it's good and it's important, but it's got to be part of a bigger strategy, yeah. And that's what they found. The best organisations and the most diverse organisations were those that had a holistic approach to diversity, and it wasn't just these tokenistic gestures. A third point, and this is really, really critical, I think, well, actually 3 and 4, I think, are both really critical. So 3, about, they said inclusive leaders cast a long shadow, yeah? And we know that. A lot of the work that we do with NHS trusts across the country, having your board on board and having a chief executive or a chair who are committed to this agenda is absolutely critical, and it makes all the difference. Yeah. So I can name you a number of organisations across the country who are really excelling in this diversity agenda, and you can probably tell me as well from some of the organisations that you represent. Well, can I ask you that? Has anybody here got a really good chief executive or chair? Yeah? Do you want to tell us? Can I have we got a microphone? Would you mind? Sorry. We're all friends. You said that, Edward. We're all friends. I'll just get a microphone and then... Thank you. Could you pass? Thank you.
Morning.
Morning.
Yeah, our CEO is female, so she's been CEO for a couple of years, and she's really, I'm going to sound like the video now, but you know, inclusive and wants everybody involved, and so she's. We've got like a BME advisory group as well that she was leading on, and then our chief finance officer. He's really on board, and it's made such a difference in the last few years because they really encourage staff, and especially number 4, middle managers matter, and they're really focusing on that, and they speak to everybody, they go out, they make time, and we're Birmingham Women's and Children's Hospital as well, so especially with a merger, that's when it was quite key, and having the senior members involved really does help, but I know a lot of organisations don't have that. So that's why this is really important to get them on board. And they encourage us to come to events like this. And they send around really harsh emails saying you must go and, whatever's going on, just make sure someone attends because it's really important. And they came to one of the last ones as well, so that was really good.
Brilliant. Is that Sarah Jane Marsh?
Sarah Jane Marsh, yeah.
She's great. She spoke at she spoke at the Confederation conference. NHS Confederation, which is our sister organisation. She spoke on a panel there. Yeah. Anybody else got someone they want to big up?
So our CEO, Jin Tompkins' photo is actually outside on the Hall of Fame, and then she's a female, and our CFO, Claire Wilson, who's a chair of HFMA, and then she's also female. Our deputy CFO, our head of financial accounts, our head of management accounts, head of income and costing, all female, all very supportive, basically encouraged us to come to events like this to bring back the best practice.
Good.
Liverpool Heart and Chest Hospital, by the way.
Good. Get the plug in. Anybody else? No? Okay. Anybody here from East London Foundation Trust? So I went to, I spoke at their BAME conference last week, I think, maybe the week before, can't remember. So there were 200 black staff from East London Foundation Trust, and little old me telling them about diversity, as if I know, But the great thing about East London Foundation Trust is you've got a black female chair, you've got a black female chief executive, so Marie Gabrielle is their chair, and Navina Evans is their chief executive, and Navina is also heavily involved, I'm really pleased to say, in the interim people plan that's just been developed. You've heard about the people plan that's just been published? Yeah. She's heavily involved in that. She's responsible for one of the 5 or 6 strands nationally around that as well. They've also got a black female chief nursing officer and a black female HR director as well, which is actually quite rare. I'd said about talking to a finance audience, HR, we're really not good around diversity. You struggle to find black HR directors across the country. So Tanya Carter, who's the HR director in East London, is quite a rarity, and she's great. So this leadership thing is really important, and it really makes a difference. And And that's what Deloitte found as well in terms of their work with the private sector. You stole my presentation, thank you. So 4th point, middle managers. It's all right. It's really, really important. Yeah, and this is the bit I think that sometimes we forget. I forget it, I think. So we think sometimes that it's just about either influencing the top or getting the bottom engaged. So I go out a lot and I talk to networks, and we promote and encourage networks, a bit like this really, this group here, a lot, because we know networks are really important and they can be really influential. And I think sometimes in that process we forget that middle bit. And what we also know, and this is what Deloitte's found, is that, and you probably know this as well as finance managers, that middle group are just really powerful. Yeah, you can have all the stuff in the world coming down from the top. If it gets to that middle bit and those middle managers aren't bought into it, or they don't understand it, or they're not part of it, they'll just block it, and it won't happen. Yeah. Equally, you can get voices coming up from the bottom, and middle managers can easily block that. They can not encourage you to come along to conferences like this. They can not give you time off for networks and forums. So they're a really powerful group. You've really got to get them on board. And particularly in times, a lot of the kickback we get in diversity is, lots of white, bit like me, white middle-aged managers come up and say, well, you're doing all this stuff for BAME staff, LGBT, disabled staff. What about white managers? And you've got to sell it as a package. Yeah, this is about developing staff generally. This is about improving the diversity of thinking within recognising the power of diverse teams. Yeah, because this is what Deloitte's found. Yeah, a diverse team is much more productive, and other reports have found this as well. There was a McKinsey's report about women on boards, and they found that boards that had female representation were much more efficient, much more productive as organisations. The 5th thing that Deloitte's found was about rewiring the system, and this is what we're starting to find in the NHS now. So, and what that is about you can advocate and promote all the behaviours in the world, but actually sometimes it's the system that's the problem, and that's what you need to change if you want to change things. So, and we found that recently, and this is one of the big things that's now come out of the Workforce Race Equality Standard. Have people heard of the Workforce Race Equality Standard? No? Okay, so within your organisations, all NHS organisations have to complete something called the Workforce Race Equality Standard. And basically it's a 9-point metric which measures in various ways the different experiences of black and white staff. Okay, so it measures so it looks at the top level in terms of the breakdown in terms of your different bandings. So the percentage of black and white staff at all the different grades across the organisation, but it also looks at the different experiences around bullying and harassment and recruitment processes as well. And also disciplinary processes. So, because there was a piece of research that was done probably about 5 years ago now called the Snowy White Peaks of the NHS. People heard of that? Okay. So it's an interesting report. It was a report looking at the boards across London. So somebody did a review of all the boards across London, which you would have thought was one of the most diverse, obviously it's one of the most diverse cities in the country. You would have thought that would have been represented in terms of that board representation, and it wasn't at all. Again, there was a sparsity of black faces when you looked across the board profiles across London. So that triggered this whole Workforce Race Equality Standard to try and sort of create some change within the system. And what they've concluded most recently is that, well, we knew this right at the beginning, so BME staff were 2.2 times more likely to be subject to disciplinary processes than white staff. Yeah, that was across the board as an average. So now what they're promoting and advocating is that they're encouraging organisations to introduce a triage system. So when somebody goes into a disciplinary process, they're recommending that somebody external looks at that and reviews it to see whether or not it's the right process to go through. Because what happens, and I know this from being a frontline HR practitioner, is that once you get into the process, it's very difficult to step out of it. So the whole idea is to try and avoid going into a disciplinary process and trying to deal with things informally as far as possible. So that's why, sometimes you have to look at the system, you have to look at the procedures and processes that you've developed and see whether or not that's what's actually creating the problem. And similarly with recruitment, for example. So one trust, is anybody here from Bradford Teaching Hospitals? No? Bit too far to come, probably. So Bradford Teaching Hospitals, a few years ago, they made a decision that they would have a representative from their BME network on every interview panel above Band 8, I think it was, because, again, there was a low representation and a poor conversion rate from shortlisting to appointment for BME staff. And just having an observer on the panel made a significant difference. Yeah, the numbers just changed, almost overnight, which was something about, they haven't explained it yet and they don't know what it is, but there is something obviously there to do with unconscious bias and the psychology of that type of thing. But so sometimes just changing the system, changing the process can change the outcome. Yeah, and that's what Deloitte's found as well. They also found that tangible goals make ambitions real. So goals are important. So you know this, don't you, in finance? You set goals all the time, don't you? Is that what you do? Yeah, targets, yeah, savings, yeah, efficiencies, yeah. And it's the same with diversity. Yeah, you have to set a target and you have to set a goal, and that can be really important. So that's what Deloitte's found, and that's what they recommend organisations should do if you want to change. So what is it you're aspiring to? So in terms of disability, so we're doing a lot of work at the moment around disability within the NHS, and we've just introduced the equivalent of the Workforce Race Equality Standard for disability. So we've got a Workforce Disability Equality Standard. So again, we're encouraging organisations to look at the different experiences of disabled and non-disabled staff. Although we haven't set targets yet, there could be a time when we start to set targets. But you have to think about, what is it you're trying to do? What numbers are you trying to get to? And with disability, it's really interesting because if you look across the piece, so if you look on the electronic staff record system, which, as you know, is the national HR database, there's 3% of staff who declare a disability. Which is about average, you would have thought. But when you look at the staff survey, which, as you know, is anonymous, 18% of staff in the NHS declare a disability. 18%. 3%, 18%. So we know, although the figure, data doesn't tell you there, over here, we know there's 18% of staff within the NHS who have got a declared disability. But 15% of them are choosing not to tell us about it because they don't want it on their official record. Yeah? So there's some real challenges there. So you have to think about. So I'm encouraging organisations because they're getting a bit fixated again on this 3% and about trying to increase that number. And I'm saying, well, don't worry about that. If you know that your staff survey tells you you've got 18 or 16 or 17, 18%. Disabled staff, then they are there. Yeah, they're there. So you need to work on that basis. Matching the inside and the outside. So this was all about public profile. Yeah. So what Deloitte's found was, and they gave a couple of examples of good and bad private sector examples of where, you know, there are organisations who were purporting to be diverse and supportive of equality, but actually their internal systems just weren't working, and they just weren't representing that. So you've got to practice what you preach, effectively, yeah, both internally and externally as well. And we know that within the NHS as well. You know, the public profile is really important, and that's why a lot of the diversity measures that I'm talking about, we don't encourage, we require organisations to publish them on your websites as well, because that public clarity, you know, transparency is really important. And then lastly, Deloitte said that, again, going back to, I think, probably where we started, so it's not a tick box exercise. This is about a whole culture approach within organisations, and that's how you bring about change within organisations. So that's why I mentioned the people plan earlier. So that's a really important piece of work for us at the moment, because basically that's setting out a new stall, I think, for the NHS in terms of what it is we're trying to achieve around diversity. So we're really excited about working with that. So I'm going to show you another video now. I like videos. So there's 8 powerful truths. I think there's a 9th powerful truth as well, which isn't really touched on in that Deloitte's, but we have found it both with the work that we've done around the Workforce Race Equality Standard and also the work that we've done around the Disability Equality Standard as well. Because we've been developing that over the last 18 months. I've been working with NHS England very closely, and we've been developing the Disability Standard. And as part of that, we've been going out and talking to disability networks. We've been talking to disability organisations like Disability Rights UK, Scope, national organisations who represent disabled people. And we talk a lot about voice. We say voice is really important, and I think voice is actually critical in all of this. So I've got a really powerful video, I think it is anyway, which gives you an example, I think, of what voice is and what voice should be.
The first day I realized I was black, it was 2000. We had just learned about blacks for the first time in 2nd grade. At recess, all the white kids chased me into the wood chanting slave. My mother said I refused to come out for 3 hours. Said she thinks I was lost in the trees, but I just needed to be closer to my roots.
As a woman, having a boyfriend is a battle. If 70% of us are abused in a lifetime, what is the number of men doing it? The answer is not one man running faster than light to complete a mission, and that is what leaves me sick.
The second day I realized I was black was in a gas station. I only had 25 cents, so I searched what to spend it on. The cashier floated from aisle to aisle, eyes fixed on my hands. That was the first time I realized skin color was a crime.
My body has become cause to write legislation, cause for ass smacks in the back of a class. My body has demanded everything except respect. I've been asked, what makes you feel unsafe? And I struggle not to yell.
Everything. The third day I realized I was black was in an all-white cafeteria. I gathered my legs under me, made rockets on my feet, and approached a girl. She told me she was not into my type of guy. I felt the words shoot daggers into my melanin. I have never wanted to disappear so bad.
As a woman, I've learned to answer to everything except my name. Little lady is not said to mean equal, but to make sure I remember my place, I battle between wanting to own my body and accepting there's a 1 in 4 chance a man will lay claim to my skin, a plot of land for the taking.
The last day I realized I was black was in an elevator in California. To the white woman that told me she knows what it feels like to be black because she grew up poor, I would tell you to think before you speak, but your mind has got to be bacteria infected, and any filter through that labyrinth of nothingness might be worse than no thought at all.
There's a group of women going around the room sharing their personal definition of feminism. He is the only man in the room, and all of a sudden, the tone switches to destroying the patriarchy by annihilating all men.
Do you know what it feels like to be black? To pop block your way in and out of hugs, it is not a problem you want to sympathize.
But to tell me you know my pain
is to stab yourself in the leg because you saw me get shot. We have two different wounds, and looking at yours does nothing to heal mine.
Never will I turn away an ally.
But when a man speaks on my behalf, that only proves my point.
Movements are driven by passion, not by asserting yourself dominant by a world that already put you there. You speak to no pain, you only fathom because we told you it was there. You know nothing of silence until someone who cannot know your pain tells you how to fix it. Every day is a crucifixion when there is no regards for lines crossed.
I fight so my voice can be heard. I fight for the voices you silence, all in the name of what is right.
The problem is you assume this struggle is attached to a social class. I am black and bold and beautiful by nature. Ain't no income that can change that.
The problem with speaking up for each other
is that everyone is left
without a voice.
Clever stuff. I think we're going to share the slides, yeah? So you can access that later on if you want to watch it again. It's very fast talking, I'm sorry, for those of you who weren't able to follow it, but there is a subtitled version, which I should have used, I'm sorry. Okay. Oh, that looks scary. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to do something now, because I was asked to encourage you. So Edward and Grace sort of said to me, I want you to try and get the people in the room to talk about and think about what diversity and inclusion means to them. So the way that I do this, I've used this quite a lot, this technique, and it's very useful. I love poetry. You probably know that, you've guessed that now. Yeah, I like poetry. Do people know haiku? Yeah? Okay, all right. I did this presentation a couple of weeks ago in another room, and nobody knew what haiku was at all. And so haiku is a 17th century Japanese form of poetry. Has anybody been tweeting, by the way? Just ask. Yeah, good, thank you. This is similar to tweets, yeah? So, because that's what I like about it, it's very compact, yeah? So it's a very traditional type of poetry, and it's got a very specific structure to it. So it consists of 3 lines, or phrases, they call them. And you've got 5, 7, and 5 syllables. People know what a syllable is? Syllable, yeah? Syllable, yeah? So 17 syllables. It's not a lot, yeah? Once you start to break it down. So the words are really important. Yeah, grammar goes out the window completely. All right, forget grammar. Yeah, completely. Words are important. Okay. They really focus on, in Japanese poetry, they focus on the where, the what, and the when. You need to think about the where, the what, and the when. And every word is really, really important. So I'll give you some examples. So these are translations, which isn't perfect, yeah, because they don't translate particularly well. But these are some examples. So a lot of haiku is about seasons, yeah, the seasons of the year. So these are 2 about autumn. So the first one is the eyes of a stag, listening to and feeling rising autumn wind. And then the second one is wind in the west, fallen leaves, gathering in the east. So no grammar. I mean, you could criticise that till the cows come home, in terms of grammar, but the words are really powerful. Yeah. There's a modern example. So does anybody know John Cooper Clarke? Yeah. So John Cooper Clarke is a punk poet from the 1970s, 80s, a few years ago now. He's still around. So he tried to write a haiku once. And this was his attempt. And he stuck to the rules, yeah? So the 5, 7, 5, yeah? So to convey one's mood, that's 5. In 17 syllables, that's 7, is very difficult. So he ran out, yeah. He ran out of words. So what I'd like you to do on your tables, or individually, yeah, do it individually, but then have a conversation on the table. You will all be poets by the end of, in the next 20 minutes, you're going to be poets, okay? So write a haiku, please, of what you think equality, diversity. Can I suggest you don't use the words equality, diversity, or inclusion? Yeah, choose some other words. Yeah. So maybe about 5 minutes. Yeah. So I'm just going to ask a few people to read out their haikus. Okay, so, sorry, what's your? Pamela. So Pamela first. So Pamela, do you want to introduce yourself or?
Okay, I'm Pamela Canucci, coming from Addenbrooke's Hospital, Cambridge. So grammar aside, don't assume to know, capability level, openness is key.
Very good, very good. Yeah. Do you want to introduce yourself again? Yeah.
I'm Catherine from Central North West London. So ours is together as one, sharing, caring, and honesty, and not be apart.
Very nice. Thank you. Yes?
Not tokenism.
Hold on a second there. Oh, sorry. Oh, you've got your mic, haven't you? Yeah.
I have too, yeah. Not tokenism, feeling comfortable, give me an amen.
Yeah.
My name is Siddharth. I'm from Benign Care. A garden of all, flowers, grass, birds, sun, moon, all come in as one.
Oh, I like that. That's good. You've done this before, haven't you?
Unconscious bias.
Unconscious. Yeah?
What did you say? I didn't hear what you said.
I said he's done it before. Yeah. You can't hide at the back, yeah. There must be somebody here. You can put it on Twitter as well if you want, yeah? That would be nice. Do you want to read yours? Okay. Yeah?
It says, being different is important, but it doesn't matter much.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah?
See me as I am, not your perception of you. Let me succeed and be.
Very good, yeah. Thank you. And I love the variety. Yeah, you've got sort of the seasonal type thing there, and then you've got the individual thing as well about personal empowerment. Is anybody else dying to? Did you want to? Yeah. Okay.
My name's Jasmita from Hertfordshire Partnership. Do I have a voice? Anxiety shuts me down. I'm ready to scream.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. It's quite a nice technique, that actually. The whole haiku thing is quite a nice technique because you can apply it to anything and not diversity. So if you're ever running a session, if you want a bit of an icebreaker, it's quite a nice way to get. And it gets people focused as well on the issues that we're talking about. So I'm just going to finish up with I'm going to talk about some good practice, and then we've probably got about 10 minutes if you want to have some questions as well, and a bit of a conversation. So, because again, Edward and Grace asked me to talk about good practice, so I've given you a few examples already, but there's a few good sources of good practice around there. So this isn't a very good slide, I'm sorry, but the one on the left there is a Care Quality Commission report, which is probably a couple of years old now. It's not too old. It's called Equally Outstanding. And it's a resource guide around organisations, NHS organisations, who have sort of taken an equality and human rights approach to their work. And it's quite nice because it showcases different types of organisations. So it ranges from small GP practices right up to acute hospitals in terms of how they've sort of embraced this whole diversity agenda. And it tells their story. I think it's about 10 organisations that they showcase and case study in the document, and they pick out some key parts of it as well. So it's quite interesting, and it talks about how, and this is where it's relevant to yourselves in terms of finance, how diversity is integrated into all of their systems. So it's not just a workforce thing, it's not just a patient thing. It's in everything that they do. So it's a good report, so I'd recommend that to you. NHS Employers, we run a programme called the Partners Programme. So every year we work with 30 to 40 NHS organisations over the year, and we bring them together 3 or 4 times, similar to sort of today, and help them to increase their confidence and competence and capability around diversity and inclusion. And we've been running that for a number of years now. A number of your organisations might well have been on that programme. It's worth going back to your organisation when you go back and finding out, perhaps has your organisation been on the Partners Programme, or is it on at the moment? We've just taken on, literally in the last few weeks, we've started the 2019-20 programmes. We've got 40 NHS organisations who are on that. And the good thing about that is we've expanded it as well. So we've taken on some fire services as well in recent years, and a couple of charities as well into that programme. So again, we're just trying to get different voices into that conversation. And then we love an award, don't we, in the NHS? We love awards, yes. It's no different in diversity. There's lots of different diversity awards. The one on the right there, ENEI, so that's the Employers Network for Equality and Inclusion, is an external organisation that we work closely with, and they run an awards every year. They held their awards last week, I think it was, or maybe the week before. No, it was last week, at the Law Society. And we sponsored a couple of their awards, and there were about 3 or 4 NHS organisations. These are awards for, again, public and private sector. I was talking to a colleague earlier, about the difference between public and private sector, and I was saying, I don't think there's a great deal of difference. And so these awards were for, there were the likes of IBM there, the Home Office, and then smaller businesses as well who won awards. But also there were public sector organisations there, local government, Croydon Council there, I think they won a couple of awards. They're a very good council. So awards are always very good in terms of, and you can find on the ENEI website, there's a brochure that they produce, which again, just sort of quickly showcases all of the different organisations. So there's lots of stuff out there if you want to find out a bit more. And that's it from me, really. So I just thought I might ask if you've got any questions you wanted to ask. Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you. One here and then one behind, yeah?
Okay. So I'm Karen Hamilton from the Royal Free London. I suppose my question to you is, you're the head of this, so in a nutshell, you've shown us lots of examples of what other people are doing. What do you think we should be doing? Based on everything you've seen, what do you think are the top 3 things that we need to do? So I suppose this is where I need your help, because I genuinely don't know enough about finance, yeah? I don't know what you do. What we encourage NHS organisations to do is we encourage, and you may know, the equality impact assess. Do you do equality impact assessments in your organisation? Yeah. So, and we normally apply that. So my sort of knowledge of that is when you might have a new, I don't know, disciplinary process or a recruitment process. So you might introduce a new policy, you might take it through all the necessary processes, and as part of that you would impact assess it, equality impact assess it. So what impact is this going to have on different groups? I would encourage you to do that with your finance processes. Yeah, I did see a really fascinating
presentation once by somebody from Department of Health Finance, and they were talking about how they impact assess the way the Department of Health spends its money, generally across all those billions of pounds, and they look at it in terms of who are the groups across the country who are most likely or least likely to benefit from that. So I'd encourage you to impact assess your processes. I'd encourage you, I suppose, just to talk to, because I know what it's like working in a big organisation. We all work in silos, and so often we don't talk to colleagues. So talk to your HR colleagues, talk to your training colleagues as well, and just see whether or not there's any way that you can sort of integrate some of your work into their work, and cross-fertilise. I mean, it's that cross-fertilisation idea I think is really exciting. When you get somebody from finance talking to somebody from organisational development, where's the common ground? And I think there's always commonality, and I think that can only help. Sorry, it's only 2 suggestions. I haven't got 3, I'm afraid. You might have some ideas. Some other people might have some ideas. So.
Is that working?
Yeah, it's working.
Carol Cooper, I'm Finance Manager for NHS England, NHS Improvement.
Hello.
Hi. I had a new experience recently regarding diversity and inclusion, and it made me realise how much I don't know and what I need to do. So I manage an undergraduate finance trainee placement programme, and we interview people from university who want to come and work with us for a year. The interviews took place very recently, and the first candidate was actually deaf. I've never interviewed a deaf person before. Very new experience. She was a lovely candidate. We had an interpreter, so I had to work with the interpreter to interpret. But what it made me realise is when we're actually interviewing, what are we looking for in a candidate? Because really, that lady needs support in the office but could do a job in the office, but it's understanding what support is required. So for me, it was a whole new learning experience because I had to deal with different people to support her, to come to interview, to support her on the phone and so forth. And it made me realise that although I am really interested in diversity and inclusion, I do promote that within our team, there are people who need support and I don't know where to go and get that support. So, for example, with this lady, I probably need educating in terms of how you would employ somebody who is deaf, what support is out there and so forth. And it made me realise that I need to learn a lot more. So my question to you is, with this particular lady who was deaf, what sort of support could I get as an employer to try and support her in the office?
Okay. So I can speak from experience here, because when I about 25 years ago, I worked for the children's charity Barnardo's, and I recruited a secretary, and she was deaf, and like you, it was the first time I'd come across that. Certainly when she asked for to have a signer at the interview, we had to sort of make all sorts of arrangements and things that we'd never thought about before. And then she worked with me for at least 2 years, and it was a fantastic experience because I learnt so much. There is a lot of support out there. There's for a start, there's Access to Work. Have you probably heard about Access to Work, which is a government scheme which gives support to people. So if you're a deaf person, you can get support for signers to come in for like meetings, big meetings like team meetings, staff meetings, those type of things. There's lots of information out there. We're just in the middle actually of producing a guide for managers around managing disabled staff. And it's got all sorts of tips and examples around reasonable adjustments. So things that you might want to change and adapt for. But the biggest thing I'd say to you is talk to them. Just ask the person, This is what disabled staff say to us all the time, Just ask us, We'll tell you what we want, And then you can work out whether or not it's reasonable and whether you can afford it or not. But don't be afraid of asking. And don't be afraid of getting it wrong either. You know, you can do all sorts of fancy things, like you might learn sign language or something like that. But if the person doesn't use sign language, and there's no point, you know. So again, ask them what would be helpful for them. But there is a lot of support out there, yeah. But I do think actually disability is going to, and the focus that we've got at the moment on disability is throwing up all sorts of challenges, I think, for us in terms of things like the recruitment process, the whole recruitment process. We don't think enough about, you know, how do we promote our organisation? How do we make it accessible enough? So, yeah. It's coffee time, I think, isn't it? Probably. Oh, one at the back. Okay. Final question. Yeah.
Hi, Catherine. I work for Oxford University Hospitals. I was wondering about your first example that you used with Qantas. So they made a big loss to a reasonable profit, but with 4 years, and they're saying about the diversity of thought. But, well, if my organisation is anything to go by, you know, people don't actually change that much in terms of the staff and especially the board within 4 years. So it sort of didn't quite ring true that was the, you know, just you can go from having, I use the NHS example, snowy white peaks in 2013 to suddenly having a real diversity of thought just 4 years later.
Yeah.
Or was it, you know, so that's the sort of, I'm not sure what my question is, apart from does that ring true to you then in terms of whether you can make that sort of change in 4 years?
Yeah, it was an abridged version that I gave you. There's a lot more to it, and they made lots and lots of changes. What I didn't mention was in 2017 when they made that profit, they were also given an award for being the safest airline in the world as well. So there was a lot about, obviously, safety. I mean, safety is one of their core raison d'etres, as an organisation. So it was about the whole system, the whole process, The diversity of thinking was more about the philosophy and the ethos and culture within the organisation. But lots of other system changes as well, So it was a very abridged, simplified version, But I just thought it was a good example to, you know, things can change in that period of time. And we need to get quicker and faster, actually, I think, in the NHS at making things change. We wait too long, I think, for some of this stuff. And that's why, again, I think voice is so important. Can we get one final question? Is that just behind you? Is that one? Oh, we've got a microphone, it's okay.
Sorry. Hi, Anila Hussain from Stockport Trust. It was just a quick one on the point before you mentioned about the staff survey, people declaring or self-reporting disability compared to the HR data. So we have actually recently got a bit hung up on that and doing a big piece of work to try and encourage staff to self-report. So when you were saying about publishing the data, can you use the staff survey information to publish the data? It doesn't have to be from the HR, because we are quite hung up on that at the minute and trying to do a massive drive. Because, like you said, there's a big discrepancy from people self-reporting on the staff survey to our HR figures.
Yeah, it's anonymised data, isn't it? So, you know, you're not going to breach any confidences or, you know, around it. So, use it. And I think it's a stark example, but it's a good example. It just highlights the challenge.
Great, thank you.
Right. Okay, thank you. Can I just say thank you for being very kind to me as a non-finance person?